There is a strange pattern. When a person is truly not insane, they usually don't start a conversation by saying, "I'm not insane." But that is exactly how Edgar Poe's story begins. Not with a murder, not with the scream of blood, not even with the mystery, but with the justification. And that is very suspicious. The narrator literally bursts into the story at a raystone. Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? Let's stop here. Because this is the first moment most readers miss. Who even called him mad? Who accused him? Who diagnosed him? No one, yeah? There is not a single person in the text who says, "Yeah, you are really mad. You need a doctor, man." No one asks this question. He raises it himself. He starts the argument himself. He starts the defense himself. And as if he's already on trial, as if he has already been caught, already been sentenced. Now imagine you are an investigator. In front of you is a man. You haven't even asked a single question yet. And he's already shouting, "I'm not insane." What would you think first? Probably, you're insane. That's something wrong with you." That is exactly the trap Poe builds for the reader. We don't know anything about the protagonist yet, but we already start not trusting him, and it only gets worse because the narrator decides to prove his sanity. And he does it in the strangest way possible. He says, "My disease had sharpened my senses." So he does admit he has a disease. He does not deny it, but he considers it an advantage. Seriously. On the top of that, he starts boasting about his abilities. He claims, "I heard all things in heaven and on earth. I heard many things in hell." Think about this sentence. It sounds impressive, almost poetic. But taken literally, it becomes unsettling. The man says he hears hell, not wind, not echoes, not hallucinations, yeah, hell. Okay. And here appears the first real question of the story. What if we are dealing with a man who cannot be trusted at all? What if everything we are about to hear is filtered through a mind that cannot distinguish reality from imagination? Then a problem arises. Can such a person be a reliable witness to his own story? Or is Edgar Poe deliberately placing us inside the mind of a madman? Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this video with your friends. In this way, you enrich them and help them growth of the community. You're on the RobertBooks channel. Let's begin. Now pay attention. What becomes truly terrifying starts next, because we expect a motive for the crime. Any crime needs a motive: hatred, jealousy, money, revenge, something. But the narrator unexpectedly removes all of them. He says, "I loved the old man." Loved, not hated, not despised, not afraid, but loved. The old man never insulted him, never deceived him, never harmed or threatened. And even his money didn't interest the mother. Now stop here, because this becomes truly terrifying. If there is no hatred, no conflict, no gain, then why kill him? Why does such a thought even arise? And here, Paul gives an answer that sounds like a symptom of a mental disorder. The narrator says, "I think it was his eye." Oh, good, the eye. Nice. Not the man, not the actions, not the words. The eye. The eye of the tiger. Tun, tun, tun. Tun, tun, tun. And here the obsession begins. In fact, the old man disappears from the story almost immediately. That's very unusual. We learn almost nothing about him. No name, no age, biography, character. Instead, we constantly hear about the eye again and again and again. As if the old man stops being a human being and turns into a single organ. One detail, one symbol. The narrator describes it like this: he had the eye of a vulture. A, the eye of a vulture. Dun, 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 a pale blue eye covered with a fur. This is a very strange description because in reality, Poe is almost certainly describing an eye disease, probably cataract. So, what frightens the narrator would look like a normal illness of old age to an ordinary person. But the narrator does not see cataract, he sees evil, threat, something inhuman. You can ask why. This is where things get interesting. Many researchers believe the eye is not about the old man at all. The eye is about the narrator himself. He feels as if that gaze is exposing him, looking through him, seeing everything he's trying to hide: his fear, his madness, his dark side. So the problem is not the eye. The problem is that the eye forces the protagonist to look at himself. And they may be exactly why it becomes so dangerous. The moment the mother is born, the most terrifying thing about this setup is not the protagonist wants to kill the old man. Most terrifying thing is how the thought appears. Look closely, he doesn't say, I decided to kill him. No, it happens almost unnoticed, as if the thought crawls into his mind on its own. He says, it is impossible to say how the idea first entered my brain. Good, yeah? This is the key line. He doesn't know. He can't explain it. He cannot name the cause. As if the idea appeared by itself like a parasite, virus, obsession, like something placed inside his mind. And then he adds, it haunted me day and night. This is no longer a plan, no longer a disease. The decision, the yeah, decision. No longer an intention, this obsession. And this moment the story turns from a mother plot into a story of a man slowly losing control over his own mind. The most frightening part is that he does not even realize it. On the contrary, the deeper he falls into madness, the more he convinces himself that he's completely sane. That is perhaps the most dangerous kind of madness. 7 nights before the mother. What is more terrifying than murder is waiting for it. If the narrator had simply burst into the room at night and killed the old man, we would have a crime story. But Poe writes a story about madness, and madness loves rituals, symbols, repetition, obsessive actions, of course. So after the decision to get rid of the old man, something strange happens. He does not act, he waits. And he begins to play a game whose rule exists only in his head. Every night, exactly at midnight, he goes to the old man's bedroom door and opens it very slowly. So slowly that he later even boasts about it. Can you imagine how so fucking crazy he is? Listen to how he says it. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay up on his bed. An hour. Think about it. An hour just to open a door for an ordinary person. This sounds absurd. But for the narrator, it is proof of genius. He's literally proud of himself. Proud of how he can sneak, he can hide, he can deceive from the process itself. from the feeling of power, from the feeling of control, from the feeling that only he knows the truth. He's already living a double life. There is a detail many people miss. Day and night show completely different people. At night, the narrator becomes a predator, a shadow, hunter, and in the morning, an ideal friend. He himself says, "In the morning, I went boldly into a chamber and spoke to him cheerfully. And even worse, I called him by name in a hurried tone." Imagine this scene: the old man wakes up, in front of him stands a caring person smiling, asking about his health, interested in how the night went, and just a few hours earlier, that same person was standing by his bed in complete darkness, watching him, studying him, planning his death. This is one of the main horrors of the story. The monster looks completely normal. No mask, no insane laughter. On the contrary, polite, calm, friendly. That is exactly why he's terrifying. The old man is still alive, but his power is already gone. There is no oh, there is another detail actually. Formally the old man is still alive, yeah, but if you look deeper, his fate is already decided. He does not even know he is part of this story. He doesn't know he has become the object of someone's obsession. He does not know that someone comes to watch him every night. He lives his ordinary life, as it should be, while the narrator has already given him a death sentence. This creates a terrifying asymmetry. One person knows everything, the other knows nothing. That's why every night is not just observation, it is a rehearsal of power, a rehearsal of murder, a rehearsal of control over another life. The strangest detail of the story, but here is what is surprising at the same time. For 7 nights, the killer cannot commit the crime. And the reason seems completely absurd. Every night, the eye is closed. Every time it was closed. And so he leaves. He doesn't kill, he doesn't attack, he does nothing. Why? Because he says, "It was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. I see you." Sauron eye. Uh-huh. This is one of the most insane lines in the story. Think about it. In front of him lies a man, a living man, but for the narrator, the man doesn't matter, only the eye matters. As if the old man had stopped existing entirely, only a detail remains, only a symbol. In a sense, he no longer sees the old man as a human being, and that is a very dangerous point. All violence begins exactly when a person stops seeing another person as a human. Why must the eye be open? And here is a question appears. Why does the narrator wait for the eye to be open? Why can't he kill the old man while he sleeps? The answer may be deeper than it seems. If the eye symbolizes judgment, observation, or symbolizes the truth about the narrator himself, then the murder can only happen when that gaze is directed at him. He's not trying to kill a man, he's trying to destroy the gaze, to destroy the witness, destroy the thing that makes him feel exposed. In fact, he wants to kill not a person, but knowledge about himself. That is why he waits for 7 nights, not for the old man, for the eye. Only for the eye. The most disturbing thing. Now imagine yourself in the old man's place. You know nothing, you suspect nothing. You go to sleep peacefully, you wake up in the morning, you see a friendly acquaintance. You talk, you laugh, you have breakfast, and you cannot even imagine that every night someone leans over your bed, literally counting the days until your mother. Perfect, yeah? That is the real horror of the story, not the blood or death. The real horror begins here in silence, in waiting, in the fact that evil is already in the room but the victim doesn't know it yet. And that is exactly why the eighth night will become a catastrophe. Because for the first time in the story, not only the old man will wake up, fear will wake up. And then a real psychological duel begins between hunter and victim. Eighth night, when fear wakes up. There is one detail that is easy to miss. The narrator says, "On the eighth night, I was more than usually cautious." Notice what he does not say. He doesn't say, "I was angry, excited." He doesn't even say, "I was afraid." He is proud of himself again, of his caution, of his skill, of his control. He believes he's fully in charge of the situation, but right here, fate begins to laugh at him. Because every maniac believes he has accounted for everything until something goes wrong. This is one of the most brilliant moments in the story after a week of perfect nightly interactions. The narrator feels invisible. He's completely intoxicated by his own superiority. Imagine his thoughts. The old man is asleep, unaware of anything, and the mother is already standing on the door. He has almost won. He is already celebrating the victory in his mind, and right at the moment he makes a mistake, a very human mistake, he smiles. In fact, everything falls apart because of that self-satisfaction. Satisfaction. Tune. The narrator says, "When I had waited a long time very patiently, I made up my mind to open the lantern, but before I did this, I gave a slight groan. And the old man wakes up. That's it. One sound, one smile, 1 second, and the perfect plan begins to collapse." Yeah. After that, the old man plan begins. The old man plan. Yeah. After the perfect plan begins to collapse, after that, the old man says just 2 words, "Who's there?" But in the context of the story, the sound more terrifying than a scream. Because for the first time, the victim senses danger. He does not understand it, he does not see it, but feels. And here begins the scene many consider the most disturbing in Poe's work. Not the murder or violence, but this conversation without a conversation. The old man sits in the dark, the mother stands in the dark, a few feet apart, absolute silence between them. Now comes the moment that reveals the narrator's true madness. After the old man wakes up, the killer doesn't run, doesn't attack or hide. He simply stands here for an entire hour. An hour. Try to imagine that physically. The old man sits in bed, tense, listening. The mother stands nervy, motionless, breathless, silent. This is no longer human behavior, it is a predatory behavior. Like someone nocturnal animal, a spider, a snake, something that can wait for hours for the perfect moment. And here something strange happens. For the first time in the story, the killer begins to understand the old man. Until now, he was an object, a victim, a target. But now the narrator says unusual sounds of that watch when enveloped in cotton. What sound? The sound of terror, of fear. And then comes one of the most powerful lines in the story. It was the beating of his own heart. This is an incredible moment because suddenly it turns out the murderer and the victim have more in common than it seems. The old man fears death, and the narrator, he lives in fear too. Perhaps all his life, perhaps that is why he is so obsessed with the eye. Perhaps that is why he is so disturbed by being seen. He sees himself in this old man. and that enrages him. Now we enter a more physical part of the story. The narrator speaks of the old man uh, as if he's already doomed. Death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him. The old man doesn't see the murderer, he doesn't hear him, he doesn't know what is going, and yet he still feels it. Why? Because sometimes a person senses danger before they can explain it. Poe captures one of the oldest human fears, the feeling that someone is in the room. You do not see them, but you know they are there. And now we reach the moment the narrator has been living for all week. He slowly opens the lantern, slower than anything should be. He lets out the light in small bursts, like a surgeon performing an operation, like a priest conducting a ritual. That cursed eye, and suddenly the beam falls on the eye, that eye, cursed eye. The eye that has tormented him for days. It was open, wide open, and something happens. The narrator sees the eye and loses control. For a week he was calm, cold, calculated, in control, but the moment the eye opens, everything collapses. As if he was never fighting the old man at all, he was fighting that gaze, that symbol, that mirror in which he sees himself. And here comes the central question of the scene. Who is more afraid of right now? The old man or the mother? Who is more afraid? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. The old man, of course. He sits in the dark, sensing death approaching, but look closer. The narrator is trembling, nervous, hearing impossible sounds, obsessed with the gaze, unable to escape it. Maybe the hunter was the old man all along, and the real victim was the murderer himself, trapped inside his own mind. At this point, the story stops being about a crime. It becomes about a man losing a battle inside his own consciousness. And then comes the climax. The most famous scene in the story, the heartbeat. But if you look closely, the question is, what is he actually hearing? After the light falls on the eye, the narrator suddenly hears a sound. At first it is faint. He describes it strangely, not as a normal heartbeat, not as a pulse, but like a watch wrapped in cotton. Poe doesn't simply write, I heard a heart. He deliberately makes it uncertain, muffled, unreal. So what's this? If the narrator truly has supernatural hearing, maybe he really does hear the old man's heart. But if he's insane, then the sound exists only in his mind, right? And the longer the scene continues, the more unstable reality becomes. The sound grows louder, faster, clearer. The old man's heart almost becomes a character of its own. The room disappears, the body disappears, only two things remain, the eye and the heart. The eye that condemns him, the heart that betrays him. The narrator says that sound affects him like drums in a soldier's ears before battle, as if the heartbeat itself is pushing him toward murder. And then comes something even more disturbing. He's not afraid of the old man, not of the crime, not of guilt. He's afraid of the neighbors will hear the sound. Think about this. A man is about to die in front of him, but what disturbs him is nice. At this point, this old man is no longer a person, he has become an obstacle to remove. And then everything breaks. After a week of waiting, the narrator can no longer stand it, cannot tolerate this sound. He cannot tolerate the eye. He cannot wait anymore. and bursts into the room. The old man screams once, only once. The narrator throws him to the floor and suffocates him under the bed. And then comes something strange. The heart continues to beat, even after the attack. Even after the violence begins, this blurs everything. Reality and perception no longer match. We only see what the mother sees, and the mother is no longer reliable. Finally, the sound stops, silence returns. The narrator checks the old man's body and convinces himself the heart has stopped. The old man is dead. The eye will never open again. The enemy is gone, or so he thinks, but he realizes the irony. He believes he has destroyed the source of his fear, the eye, the gaze, the witness, but the real problem was never the old man. It was inside him all along, and in very soon he will understand it, because the hardest part of this story was not the murder, it was staying alone with his own mind. And that is what leads into the scene with the police officers, where the story turns from the perfect crime into a complete psychological collapse. Triumph or failure. And here begins a new, almost theatrical part of the story, the scene with the police officers. And it's important to immediately feel the contrast. Just moments ago, there was night tension, murder, uh, and suddenly an ordinary visit from the authorities, a calm conversation, a routine check. The narrator meets them completely calmly, even over calmly. He behaves as if nothing has happened. More than that, he himself sets this calm tone as if he had rehearsed every movement, every phrase in advance. He smiles, he offers them hospitality, he explains that the old man has gone out of town. He accounts of the lack of noise. He demonstrates the confidence of a man has nothing to hide. And most importantly, he genuinely believes he looks convincing. The police also see nothing suspicious. They ask no extra questions, do not sense anything wrong. They simply sit in the room, talk, and do their job. The atmosphere becomes almost ordinary, and it's precisely in this ordinary that this main tension of the scene begins to merge, because the mother is literally only steps away from the body. He is sitting next to the place where the corpse is hiding under the floorboards. And yet he is forced to engage in polite conversation. Every word he speaks is no longer just speech, it is control, it's a mask. It's an attempt to keep reality from collapsing. He talks about trivial things, smiles, moves calmly, but inside him, something else is already beginning to move in the opposite direction. And here Poe makes another brilliant turn. Externally, the protagonist is completely composed, but internally, he begins to fall apart precisely at the moment when danger seems minimal. At first, it is almost unnoticeable, a slight tension, heightened alertness, increased sensitivity to sound. He begins to hear what, as he believes, no one else hears. And gradually, what he has just gotten rid of returns, the sound. At first, it's very faint on the edge of perception, then clearer, closer, more unbearable, a heartbeat. That same heartbeat, and here is the key point: the police continue sitting calmly. They discuss ordinary matters, do not react, they hear nothing. But for the narrator, the sound becomes absolute reality. It grows stronger with every second, it fills the room. It begins to drown out of everything else: conversation, movement, even thought itself. And the stronger it becomes, the more the narrator changes. His confidence begins to crack. He still tries to keep his composure, but inside, panic is already forming. Not sudden panic, but rising, sticky, inevitable panic. He starts speaking louder than necessary, moving too sharply, laughing at the wrong moments. He tries to drown out the sound with this behavior, but that only increases the internal pressure. And at some point, he can no longer tell whether he is actually hearing it or if it exists only in his mind. That boundary disappears completely. The heartbeat becomes more than a sound. It turns into accusation. Every beat seems to say the same thing. You did it, you are here, you will not escape. And then comes the breaking point where attention can no longer be controlled. The narrator cannot hold it anymore. He breaks. At first, it looks like a sudden gesture, then a shout, then a confession that escapes against his will. He is no longer in control of himself, not of his voice, not of the situation, and with that, the entire structure of the perfect crime collapsed. The police are in shock, I'm pretty sure. They don't understand what is happening, but in an instant, everything becomes clear to them. The man in front of them is not just nervous, he's confessing. And in that moment, the story fully leaps. The perfect murder was not exposed by investigation. It was destroyed inside the murder himself. Not by evidence, not by interrogation, but by a sound that may not even exist yet. And that is what makes Poe's ending so powerful. The crime is not an external event, but an internal collapse of a mind that cannot withstand its own pressure. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.